Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for joining and welcome to HCP's online webinar for this month titled Transforming Risk to Resilience. We are lucky to have two speakers in today's webinar, Cheryl Murphy and Chad Schiffman. Before the presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction of each of our speakers, and I'll start with Cheryl. Cheryl joined HCP in March of 2021 as a senior compliance consultant. Before joining HCP, she worked at the same hospital for 23 years. She has held many roles, including Revenue Integrity Auditor, Privacy Officer, Revenue Management Compliance Coordinator, Corporate Compliance Coordinator, and Billing Insurance Specialist. The hospital where she worked also had a multi-specialty medical practice under its umbrella, including orthopedics, podiatry, general surgery, urology, family practice, internal medicine, pediatrics, and OBGYN, in which she served as the privacy officer, payer credentialing specialist, and licensing specialist. She has over 30 years of experience in the healthcare industry. Cheryl's expertise is regulatory compliance with an emphasis on revenue management, Medicare billing guidelines, and HIPAA. She holds a Bachelor's of Business Administration degree in Healthcare Management and is certified in Healthcare Compliance. We look forward to hearing from her shortly. And now I'm going to briefly introduce Chad. Chad joined Healthcare Compliance Pros in 2014 as the Director of Compliance and later became Director of Risk Management. He brings more than 20 years of experience in healthcare, information technology, and compliance consulting. Chad works closely with healthcare organizations on HIPAA and high-tech matters, including breach determination and mitigation, as well as OIG and CMS compliance. He conducts on-site audits, helps implement HIPAA regulation requirements, and provides regulatory guidance to protect organizations from audit findings and breach related penalties. Chad is also a published author and contributor to leading healthcare associations, including MGMA, AAOE, RBMA, AOA, PACM, and HBMA. He holds undergraduate degrees in medical specialties and healthcare administration, along with a master's degree in healthcare informatics. We are so excited for our presentation given by these amazing speakers. So with that, I will turn the time over to you both.
Well, welcome everybody. Like Josie said, my name is Cheryl Murphy, and I just want to welcome you to our webinar on transforming risk to resilience, cybersecurity through the lenses of the Cabellian, and ancient wisdom for modern threats awareness. Healthcare cybersecurity is no longer just about responding to breaches or completing an annual HIPAA risk assessment. The regulatory landscape has shifted significantly. OCR is signaling that cybersecurity must be operationalized and continuously managed and not treated as a once-a-year compliance exercise. Under the HIPAA Security Rule, we are required to ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI at all times. That obligation is ongoing. This means our mindset must evolve from checking the box to embedding cybersecurity into governance, daily operations, and organizational culture. In January of this year, OCR released its first cybersecurity newsletter under the new administration. The newsletter emphasized 4 key themes: system hardening, reducing the attack surface, maintaining security baselines, proactively managing vulnerabilities. System hardening means configuring systems to reduce weakness before attackers can exploit them. Reducing the attack surface includes removing unnecessary software, disabling unused services, and eliminating default or inactive accounts. Maintaining security baseline by standardizing configurations for servers, laptops, medical devices, and other systems. Proactive vulnerability management includes regularly patching, monitoring vendors, alerts, and identifying risk before attackers do. The message from OCR is clear. Cybersecurity must be proactive, documented, and ongoing. OCR proposed updates to the HIPAA Security Rule reflected more measurable and enforceable expectations. Risk analysis is expected to be more comprehensive and regularly updated. Technical safeguards include access controls, encryption, audit logging, and authentication and receiving renewed scrutiny. Testing and validation of safeguards are increasingly viewed as expected practices rather than optional enhancements. Incident response planning must demonstrate operational readiness, not just policy documented. Several specific elements that are emphasized in the proposed updates are maintaining up-to-date assets and network inventories is essential. We cannot protect what we do not know exists. Regular vulnerability scanning and penetration testing demonstrates active risk management. Multi-factor authentication is quickly becoming a baseline safeguard across the healthcare industry. Encryption, particularly for data at rest and in transit, remains a critical expectation when feasible. Annual audit of security controls help validate that safeguards are functioning effectively and not just written into a policy. Industry stakeholders, including the College of Healthcare Information Management Executives, CHIME, have raised concerns regarding feasibility and resource impact. Smaller and mid-size organizations may face financial and staffing challenges in implementing all of the proposed measures. There are also questions about the ratio and clarity of expectations. However, despite these concerns, regulatory scrutiny continues to increase. The overall direction suggests that expectations will continue to become more structured and measurable. The Office of Inspector General issued a 2025 report highlighting that HIPAA's statutory framework dates back to 1996. The cybersecurity threat landscape has evolved dramatically since then. OIG questioned whether existing enforcement authorities are sufficient to address modern privacy and security risks to EPHI. This signals that we may see continued regulatory evolution and heightened oversight in the coming years. This is a quote from OIG. HHS's ability to enforce the decade-old HIPAA privacy rule, HIPAA security rule may not be sufficient to address contemporary privacy concerns of protecting health information or increased risks to the security of electronic protected health information. Working within the statutory authorities established by HIPAA in 1996, HHS must adapt as privacy and security needs evolve. OCR and OIG guidance consistently reinforces that cybersecurity is not static. System hardening, patch management, vulnerability scanning, and monitoring are all continuous processes. Risk analysis and risk management must be revisited as technology, vendors, and threats evolve. Enforcement actions are increasingly focused on whether safeguards were operational, maintained, and periodically evaluated, not just written into a policy. Cybersecurity should not be viewed as an ongoing life cycle cybersecurity should be viewed as ongoing life cycle embedded into your day-to-day operations. Cybersecurity is not solely an IT function. Governments should set expectations and allocate resources. Clinical and operational teams influence how systems are used and protected. Workforce behavior, including password management, phishing awareness, and access control practices, directly impacts risk exposure. Technology supports compliance, but leadership oversight and the security-focused culture sustains it. Protecting EPHI requires coordination across administrative, technical, and physical safeguards. Chad, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Cheryl. Appreciate you going through all that content. I know it's a lot of information today that we're going to cover, but there are some relevant topics that we need to talk about as HHS is starting to ramp up on things. Particularly this year, as we are going to talk about a little bit today, is they've already implemented and brought HIPAA Part 2 records under their enforcement. So I think that's a good place for me to start. And then I'm going to get into a portion of the presentation where I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and I'm going to bring in some concepts, and we'll discuss those here shortly. It's a new framework, well, an older framework, we'll say, but tying it to the HIPAA Security Rule, to cybersecurity, to some of these enforcement actions with HHS, just to try to help us kind of connect the dots and really understand what's going on. So as I just sort of alluded to, just earlier this month, OCR announced a settlement with a substance abuse treatment provider for $103,000, in addition to them being required to comply with the corrective action plan. While the enforcement action actually happened last year, OCR seems to have timed their announcement with the integration of HIPAA Part 2 under their enforcement. And as part of that announcement, OCR mentioned something critical. They said, in a time where healthcare providers and other HIPAA-regulated entities are facing unprecedented cybersecurity threats, compliance with HIPAA's risk analysis provision is more essential than ever before. I made that a mouthful and I probably didn't need to. That was from our OCR director, Paula Stannard. And then she went on to say that covered entities and business associates cannot protect the protected health information if they haven't identified potential risks and vulnerabilities to that health information. From what we understand with OCR being expected to look at the proposed HIPAA security rule this year, I think this is a signal of what area they may focus on. Whether or not they decide to hear it or not, we're not sure yet. Whether they're deciding to table it, we'll have to wait and see. Our expectation is they will at least look at it and consider some of the things such as that chime letter and other organizations that have pushed back to say, hey, look, the timing is not right. We can't afford this. It's too burdensome. Or they might scale it back and really focus on cybersecurity elements. We're not quite sure yet, but there are some steps that we're going to cover today that I think can help you be more proactive within your cybersecurity programs, and then also complying with HIPAA security rule requirements as is, or if there are proposed rules that do in fact get integrated. So now shifting gears, we're going to introduce a thinking framework that may seem unusual at first, but if you stick with me, I promise it will all make sense. So the Kybalion offers 7 principles that map beautifully to workforce behavior, governance architecture, and threat awareness. These principles, they're not just abstract ideas, but principles that translate directly into how we train staff, design controls, and respond to incidents. So why introduce the Kybalion? Well, we need more than just policies and procedures. We actually need a mindset shift within the healthcare organization and within our workforces. The Kybalion gives us a vocabulary and structure for thinking about mindset in practical and actionable terms. And quite often, cybersecurity incidents begin with human behavior. These 7 principles contained in the Kybalion provide a structured way for thinking about and applying cybersecurity best practices. Now, it was published in 1908 by the 3 initiates. The Kybalion sets out these 7 philosophical principles focused on mental models, rhythm, balance, and causality. Today, we are going to use it from a thinking lens, the mind lens, really, and not mysticism or a spiritual practice. I promise I won't get woo-woo or anything like that, but as a framework for understanding complex and interconnected systems. So think of it as a pattern of recognition, a tool that helps us see how individual actions and organizational culture and threat behavior all connect. Cyber attacks, they commonly exploit cognitive bias or us being on autopilot or predictable human patterns like clicking a link. These bad actors often expect someone within, we'll call it the all of the organization, as the Kybalion refers to the all. In this case, we'll consider it the organization the all. What's most important for us to focus our cybersecurity efforts on. So they consider these someone within there to be a likely target, someone who may have their guard down or be on autopilot. So by having some organizational resilience, it requires safeguards like firewalls, but it also requires internal discipline, awareness, and culture. Each of these 7 principles maps specific behaviors, technical controls, and governance practices, and we'll walk through those. So the goal is to help every team member understand their role in the organization's cybersecurity program. Every team member plays a critical role in identifying and protecting health information. So the first principle we're going to talk about today is mentalism. Everything begins with mind and mindset. Security doesn't simply start with software, although software such as antivirus, as we know, is incredibly important. So it's making sure you do your updates. But it also starts with attention, it starts with awareness, and it starts with intention. So we've got to be paying attention to, are those an attack coming through? We've got to be aware of what they might be asking for. Be sure to look at lines and different things like that, or what is the intention of the message that you may have received, such as a phishing request? We'll talk about some of that here in just a minute. So this principle states the all is mind, the universe is mental. For any of you that have read the Kybalion, there's a whole section that's dedicated to this. It's kind of fascinating. But in our context, we're going to go ahead and think about it as the way your workforce thinks about cybersecurity and shapes their outcomes. If people are on autopilot, for example, they may click without thinking, but yet if they're aware, they'll question, they'll verify, and they'll protect. But bad actors, they count on our team operating on autopilot, clicking without thinking, and trusting without verifying. They think that we'll just let our guards down at all times. That's why we get a barrage of things. So cybersecurity mindset means being present and aware during every digital interaction. It means this is basically what we can call, I would say, security mindfulness. It's like treating EPHA interactions with the same care a surgeon brings to the operating room, perhaps a cat licking its paws even, or a dog eating a bone. You just need to really be mindful and pay close attention. And think before you click. Phishing emails are designed to bypass your conscious thought and trigger an automatic response. Question those unexpected requests. If something feels off, pause and verify through a separate channel. Reach out to your IT team. Does it feel wrong? Probably is. Your mind is the first line of defense. It's not your antivirus software. That's just an additional safeguard to help you. So be sure to practice security mindfulness, especially when handling protected health information at all times. It's critical these days. And if we think about how much we've evolved, I mean, we've gone from protecting just paper PHI not too long ago, and here we are with all this electronic health information. It's really fascinating how much we've made accessible, but yet also have to safeguard. So here's what attackers do. They craft emails that look legitimate, but they bypass our security thinking. Social engineering, you get those trust and urgency. This is your CEO. I need this done immediately. How many of y'all have received one of those? I know I sure have. Receive them all the time saying, hey, it's your CEO. And we know that they're obviously impersonating, but it's fascinating to see that. If we had our guards down, we might click on that link or respond. Now, pretexting, this is something that relies on you to question, like, you need to rely on questioning unusual requests, such as those that impersonate support, HR, or a vendor. Be sure to check for those misspellings. You'll commonly see some bizarre email addresses, for example, or you might see some funny text within the email message. Just make sure that you're paying really close to those. Watch for those crazy phone calls lately. I don't know if y'all are like me, and I'm getting tons of these calls requesting an urgent callback. It's kind of bizarre. Spear phishing, it targets you when you're distracted, rushed, or multitasking. So again, it's important to be aware of those things. Let's talk about operational and governance controls. Essentially, number one, training on cybersecurity is extremely helpful for developing organizational mindset. It's not just a check the box obligation that you should do once or even do every year, but it is something that should be ongoing. Phishing is increasingly commonplace, as a lot of us know probably on this call, and so it's very critical for us not to assume everyone knows how to spot phishing. So this is where training can come in and help identify and prevent a cyber attack from this ongoing trend. In system hardening, it begins with a conscious decision-making from the organization, from leadership. What do we allow? What do we block? And why do we block that? What's essential? What's not? Moving on to principle 2, we're going to talk about correspondence. What is above is reflected below, and what is below reflects what is above. I like to translate this into patterns that repeat across levels. It's individual behavior mirrors organizational culture. This ancient axiom means small units and large systems flow at similar patterns. If one employee has a weak password habit, that's a signal about a training gap that may be present across the organization and should be looked at. And then conversely, if leadership doesn't model security behavior, that the workforce might not either. So that's the way I figure to tie above, so below, so below, so above. In other words, what happens in one part of your organization affects all other parts of the organization. A bad actor who compromises one employee's credential, they don't stop there. They move laterally through your systems. Your individual security practices correspond to your organization's posture, your overall posture for that. So in other words, you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting everyone within your organization, your patients. Your behavior reflects organizational culture. If you're taking shortcuts, others are probably too. Small violations indicate larger problems. One person storing passwords on sticky notes. Hopefully nobody's still doing that, but I have seen that on some site visits under keyboards. It's kind of interesting to still see that happening. That's a training and enforcement gap that's easily mitigated with the policy and procedure and constant reminders, even walkthroughs. Individual actions have enterprise consequences. So compromised accounts, they can become an entry point for ransomware. To help mitigate these things, you need to watch for inconsistencies, like when someone's behavior suddenly doesn't match normal patterns, that's a red flag. So bad actors, they like to exploit correspondence. Once they're in one account, they study your communication norms and blend in. They'll move laterally from an account to the manager's account, the finance, for example. Privilege escalation happens when weak individual practices create system-wide vulnerabilities. These bad actors will look for disconnects between your written policies and actual workforce behaviors. That's where they like to strike. Governance controls must ensure administrative safeguards correspond to actual workforce actions. So policies and procedures should be applicable to the organization, not just a written policy that's set on a shelf for to collect dust, right? Small violations are actually opportunities for your organization or warning indicators of potential problems that should be mitigated and not ignored. So I'm sorry, I've been losing my voice today. So if I lose it, I apologize. Allergy season here in Florida. So when you see pattern inconsistencies, access record, like for example, accessing records at odd hours, like at midnight or 2 a.m, you're like, hey, I need these records or things like that. Unusual file transfers or anything like that. It's important to investigate those things immediately. So principle 3 is vibration. This essentially means that nothing rests, that everything moves, everything vibrates. In cybersecurity terms, the threat landscape is constantly evolving, as we know. What's impacting us this year may not have impacted us last year. That means our defenses must evolve as well. This does remind us that threats aren't static. Bad actors adapt quickly. New phishing techniques come out. New social engineering scripts emerge. There's new impersonation tactics. All these things happen, constantly changing, constantly being updated. Obviously, with AI becoming more commonplace, we're seeing some pretty creative ways, and it's getting harder and harder to spot. Therefore, your threat detection skills must continually vibrate at the same frequency as the evolving threat landscape. If you learned about phishing in last year's training and haven't updated since, you're probably behind because those tactics are changing. These attackers are innovating constantly, and we have to, on our end, to be cyber aware and have strong cybersecurity practices in place. We have to innovate much faster than they are. That means staying current on emerging threats. So subscribe to those alerts and read updates and attend your refresher training. I know that it sometimes is one of those dumb things that we've just got to do from a compliance perspective, but taking the opportunity to complete that refresher training and just reminding yourself can prevent something happen that results in a very costly breach. And it's critical to report any suspicious activity immediately, even if you're not sure. Trust your gut. It's like the old adage says, an ounce of a prevention prevents a pound of cure. That is so true in cybersecurity. So we need to recognize that what is normal, it does change over time. What looked suspicious last year, it might be standard now, and vice versa. These bad actors, they run evolving phishing campaigns. They test new subject lines. They have new sender proofs. They have new urgency tactics. They exploit seasonal events such as tax seasons. I'm already getting these offers from tax. Yeah, it's kind of crazy what's happening. Benefits enrollment, that's common. Audits and year-end closings. They like to manipulate current events. They'll impersonate, for example, the CDC during a health crisis or IRS during filing season. AI-generated attacks with deep fakes seem to be the new frontier. This involves voice cloning and impersonation, amongst other things, but those seem to be two of the big ones. Operationally, I mean, training updates they should be ongoing. We need to make sure that we're doing our training. And as burdensome as it seems, it's better to complete your training than just clicking to the end, for example, or saying, okay, I did it. There's a reason for it. Our goal here is we're working as hard as possible to update our trainings with more effective and more engaging training to try to help that need. We understand that sometimes it's burdensome, so we're trying to bring some new elements to it, make it a little bit more enjoyable while you complete that training. It's important to note that the security rule, it requires ongoing information activity, or I'm sorry, system activity review. That's essentially vibration in action, making sure that your systems are sufficient. Doing periodic security updates definitely helps keep your defenses secure. Those antivirus updates, for example. So patch management, software updates, threat intelligence, even what could be attacking you. Make sure that you're looking at all systems at all times. The importance of doing that security risk assessment every year cannot be understated. Principle 4, polarity. This means that everything is dual. Everything has poles and pairs of opposites. So in cybersecurity, we're constantly navigating between trust and verification, between speed and causation, or sorry, speed and caution, really, slowing down, taking the moment to pause, convenience and security. Can we quickly get it done? Do we need to quickly get it done? Or can we go ahead and take our time to ensure that we're following our safeguards, not bypassing things? This principle teaches us that opposites are extremes, but they're on the same continuum. For example, heat and cold, it's all part of temperature, right? It's just a matter of that temperature. It's a degree. Cold could be 0 or hot could be 70. It depends on your perspective, but it's all part of that temperature continuum. Cybersecurity, you can move along intentionally along that spectrum and getting stuck on one extreme. This involves stuff like conscious decisions, or do I trust this email, or should I verify it? Do I prioritize getting things done quickly, or do I proceed with caution? You check and double check to make sure that you have the right contact, the right information that's being sent to an intended patient. Do you have the right patient? Stuff like that is very critical. Bad actors exploit the moments when your guard is down. They'll push you towards trust, urgency, convenience, or bypass your judgments. This is your CEO. Reach out to me quickly. Get those all the time, like we mentioned before, amongst other requests from HR. Hey, I need you to come and send me your checking account information so that I can deposit an updated check for you, different things like that you'll receive that are craziness, but we know that they're bad. So keep your eye on those. Balance trust with verification. Trust your coworkers, but verify unusual requests through a second channel. If you get something that doesn't look right, trust your gut. Recognize false urgency. Legitimate requests can wait for you to verify to make sure that it is indeed legit. Do this now is definitely a red flag that you want to watch for. See both sides by understanding that granting access quickly helps workflow, but protecting data protects breaches. So it's very critical to find the balance. Artificial extremes are red flags. So again, this is stuff like you must do this immediately, or this is extremely urgent. These types of messages, they signal manipulation. Bad actor tactics, they often involve one or more of the following. So they'll involve, like we've talked about a little bit, the urgency manipulation needs to be done now, for example, that will bypass your judgment. Authority exploitation, impersonating executives or other individuals within your organization to make you comply without questioning. Or convenience attacks by just click here, it will be easier, or different messages like that you can receive that will compromise security for speed. They'll get you with that emotional manipulation for like creating fear or sympathy. I think a lot of us probably still get those emails saying that this is so and so with an ancestor far off in some country that you may not have even heard of, but you have some sort of money waiting for you. So be sure to click here. Never click on those. Operationally, it's very important to train staff to balance trust with verification. This means verifying unusual requests, even if they seem to come from leadership. Just make sure that it is indeed your actual CEO reaching out to you, not a fake CEO. Recognize false urgency as a tactic. Build a culture where it's okay to pause and verify. In fact, I think nowadays that really needs to be commonplace with some of these deep fakes with AI happening. The security rule requires us to balance and safeguard confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This is really polarity at its regulatory form. Moving on to principle number 5. I'm going to talk about rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. Bad actors, especially like operating on rhythms and patterns. They know when you're most vulnerable. This principle recognizes that vulnerability isn't constant. It has peaks, it has its valleys. Monday mornings, shift changes, holidays, mergers, acquisitions. These are high risk rhythms that we need to be mindful of. Attackers like to time their strikes with these busy periods, with these transitions, with holidays, when IT and staff are short. Understanding rhythm helps you recognize that threats are most likely when you're most vulnerable. Awareness of your own vulnerability rhythms, when you're rushed, distracted, multitasking, it's a first step into protecting yourself. Recognize that Monday mornings when you're catching up, or shift changes when communication breaks down, that is an opportunity to recognize that vulnerability rhythm. If you receive those emails from your CFO at 2 a.m., for example, asking for wire transfers, that's a rhythm break. That's a break in your everyday rhythm. That's probably strange. And unless you have timed emails to go out at that time, which most organizations don't, that's something to be mindful of. Make sure that it's legitimate if you do receive that. As we talked about a little bit, it's expect those attacks during transitions, such as mergers and acquisitions, leadership changes within an organization is a common one. Or if you're doing system upgrades, there's a potential for an attack there if systems are turned off briefly. Those are high risk periods that we need to be mindful of. So it's important to monitor for any pattern breaks, including regular vendor emails on Tuesdays and they suddenly arrive on Saturday. That could be a red flag. Bad actors like to strike when you're rushed, when you're distracted or understaffed. They like to do seasonal campaigns such as benefits enrollment, tax season, year-end reporting. They know that that's a time when you're often overwhelmed. They like to target events, such as during audits, again, those mergers, those regulatory inspections, when attention seems to be divided. That's an opportunity for them to target. When you're traveling, need this urgently, that's another potential opportunity for you to have your guard down. For example, when we're traveling, it's common to want to just pull up your laptop and use it in a place where you could be susceptible to something that you didn't know was sitting out there ready to target you. So always be mindful and watch for that social engineering tactic to get you and your guard maybe down. It's important to have protective rhythms by doing regular training cycles, schedule security updates, and doing periodic access reviews. The security rule requires a risk analysis, an initial risk analysis, then an ongoing SRA that is reviewed, updated, and considers all new risks that could happen or may have occurred during the year, or any deficiencies or controls to ensure that they are effective. It's also critical to notice any timing patterns in communication and make sure you escalate that immediately. We've talked about that a little bit, but it's organizationally, it's important to model that and ensure that every workforce member is empowered to do so. Make sure that they know that if something is strange or feels off, it probably is. So again, it's better to err on the side of caution and verify. There are no dumb questions in cybersecurity. If you have a question, be sure to ask. During high-risk periods, increase monitoring and lower approval. Additionally, during high-risk periods, it's important to increase monitoring at all times. Moving on to principle 6 is cause and effect. This means every cause has its effect and every effect has its cause. Every data breach has a root cause, for example, and that cause could be a workforce member, it could be a broken process, or a system failure that unknowingly enables a bad actor to access your systems or your information. Nothing happens by chance in cybersecurity. Breaches seem to follow predictable chains of events. So understanding cause and effects can help you recognize that you might be at step 1 in an attack sequence, that you might have a bigger problem on its way if you don't mitigate that immediately. One click from a workforce member that's busy or rushed could lead to credential harvesting. Credentialing harvesting leads to account takeover. Account takeover can lead to lateral movement, and then lateral movement could lead to a ransomware deployment throughout your organization. You might just think, oh, I just opened an attachment. There's no harm in that. But that could be the cause that set everything in motion. So it's important to understand this pattern, and I think it does help you make every decision more meaningful. Important to note that our actions have consequences. So clicking on a phishing link can lead to that credential compromise and ransomware. That harmless click could be that entry point for a multi-million-dollar breach. I'd say it's really important to report near misses. I think those are opportunities. They're not saying that, oopsie, I let my guard down or anything like that. It's just saying, hey, look, I almost clicked on this. I want to make you aware of it. That is an opportunity to really have threat intelligence, we'll call it, and say, hey, look, we could have some issues here. What do we need to do to address this? Share that with your IT and your team so that they can see if there's a bigger problem. Understand breach chain progression. So, for example, entry, information gathering, lateral movement, data exfiltration, and ransomware, they're all tied. What stage is it in? What stage are you in this breach process? Now, these multi-stage attacks, they'll use you as an entry points to move to higher value targets. With credential harvesting, they're generally patient for their account takeover. So it's important and they will be methodical. That's why it's really important to make sure that you have those strong passwords in place and that you're not clicking on anything suspicious. Question everything and just double check real quick that it's legitimate. Business email compromise, they'll study your emails for weeks, then impersonate you to initiate fraudulent wire transfers. Click here to help me process this payment, and then you find out that it's from email address that's a whole bunch of syllables and doesn't make any sense. Insider threat escalation can often lead from what just seems like a smaller violation. This could lead to a major compromise. So it's important to prevent insider threats as well within organizations. So operationally, if we look at the purpose of a security risk analysis, it's really to identify causes and also gaps. And then your risk management plan is to prevent the effects by having safeguards and different things that are implemented and up to date. Within organizations, our recommendation would be to implement a process for reporting, allow anonymous reporting, or even for individuals to be able to report without fear of retaliation. Near misses should be basically mandatory as far as being reported, because these near misses are intelligence opportunities to really mitigate a potential larger issue. Organizations should build their incident response plans that map the breach chain. So understanding what a cause is to, or what those threats are, what could be the downstream effects if we don't have safeguards that are adequate, and how do we break that chain? Do we implement other protective measures? Do we provide some additional training? What's necessary to prevent those costly breaches? The security rule requires us to understand how information flows through the organization, and really that's really cause and effect mapping. And we finally made it to the end. If you've stuck with me, thank you. I know it's a lot of concepts. So we're on principle 7, and while this theory is actually about gender, I like to refer it to more about integration, and I'll still mention what it says about gender, but I see it more for the purpose of our discussion to be related to integration. And so this, to me, this principle speaks to complementary modes that work together, such as in cybersecurity, that would be technology and human judgment, and how those can work in balance. As I mentioned, the Kybalion uses the term gender to describe everything has its masculine and feminine principles, but it's really talking about active and receptive, directive and intuitive models. And we understand this to mean detection requires both enforcement and awareness. So enforcing your policies and procedures, making sure they're in place, that they're implemented, but also making sure that workforce members are aware of them. Effective threat detection requires both active vigilance, challenging, questioning, verifying, and receptive awareness, which is stuff like sensing when something feels wrong. Again, as I mentioned earlier, trust your gut. If something's off, it probably is. Feels off, it probably is. So it's important to have policies and procedures. And again, following that gut feeling, make sure that those things work together. Make sure that you're able to really understand what to do. The best detectors within organizations combine both. They trust their intuition and verify what their policies and procedures. They understand what the policies and procedures are. Bad actors notoriously like to exploit passive compliance, such as automated responses without active verification. They'll craft messages that will bypass your information, or sorry, your intuition, and that are designed to feel legitimate with information that seems legitimate. Social engineering scripts that they may send out could trigger automatic compliance, like I'm your supervisor, do this now, or things like that. With authority impersonation. So someone saying that I'm your manager, these type of scenarios could exploit your tendency to comply without questioning. So it's still important. Again, I would just recommend taking time, pausing, questioning it. Some operational controls to think about is, let's look about it from an active perspective, which means challenging requests or verifying those identities, for example, or enforcing technical controls. Those are all examples of active ways that we can prevent or controls that we can have in place. Being receptive, such as I would say that's like creating a culture where if it feels wrong, where I guess a culture where if it feels wrong, it's valid and should be encouraged and questioned. Like employees should understand that, hey, look, if I trust my gut feeling, I'm not going to get in trouble. And I'm not, because it doesn't feel right, I'm going to slow down, pause, I'm going to question it. I'm not going to rush. And I'm just going to say, hey, look, I just want to make sure that this is accurate before I move on. That should be encouraged within the organization. The security rule, when you implement and have your policies, it requires both proactive measures and responsive measures. So you can have proactive mechanisms in place and things that you need to, how to respond to an incident should it occur. I'd say that best cybersecurity programs, they balance both of these well with structure and intuition, and technology and human judgment, for example. Those all work well together. All right, we've made it to the next section. I'm going to pass it back to Cheryl. Y'all are probably tired of hearing from me. Cheryl, do you want to take over?
Yes. Cybersecurity is not just an IT responsibility, it's a core leadership obligation, emphasizing that protecting systems, data, and operations must be embedded into the organization's culture, just like safety, ethics, and quality. Leaders set the tone when executives prioritize cybersecurity, allocate resources, and model secure behavior, the workforce follows. When leadership treats security as optional or purely technical, risks increase across the organization. Culture infrastructure means security is built into everyday decisions, workflows, and expectations. It includes clear policies, accountability, training, and consistent messaging that protecting information is part of everyone's role. In healthcare and other sensitive sectors, cybersecurity directly impacts patient safety, privacy, regulatory compliance, and operational continuity. Leadership commitment is therefore essential to preventing incidents and maintaining trust. Cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. It's not just IT's, it's not your executive team, and it's not compliance obligation. It's every workforce member who plays a critical role in protecting the organization. The reference to the 7 principles indicates that staff have been provided with practical guidance for making secure decisions in daily work. These principles serve as the framework employees can rely on when facing uncertain situations. Your judgment is the first line of defense. Technology cannot stop every threat, especially social engineering attacks that target human behavior. Employees who pause, think critically, and verify unusual requests can prevent incidents before they occur. Awareness allows staff to notice suspicious activities that automated tools may miss, such as unusual emails, unexpected requests for sensitive information, or behaviors that do not align with normal procedures. Encouraging questions is also essential. Employees should feel empowered to ask, is this legitimate? Or should I be doing this? A culture that supports speaking up reduces errors and prevents breaches. When staff are informed, alert, and confident to act, they become the organization's strongest security asset. Organizations move beyond simply managing risk to build true resilience, but must be able to withstand, respond to, and recover from security incidents. Governance sets expectations. Leadership establishes policies, roles, oversight structures, and accountability mechanisms that define how security is managed across the organization. Workforce behavior enforces safeguards. Policies only work when employees follow them consistently. Daily actions such as protecting passwords, securing devices, verifying identities, and reporting concerns put those safeguards into practice. Technology supports these efforts, but does not replace human oversight. Security tools can detect threats, block attacks, and monitor systems, but they cannot exercise judgment or make content-based decisions. Effective cybersecurity requires both people and technology working together. Finally, resilient requires intentional leadership. Organizations must actively plan for disruptions, training, incident response planning, business continuity strategies, and continuous improvement. Resilient organizations are prepared not only to prevent incidents, but also to recover quickly when they occur. The key message is that resilient is built through leadership direction, responsible workforce behavior, and supportive technology working in alignment.
All right, perfect, Cheryl. I think I'm going to pass it over to Nicole real quick to open it up for any questions. I apologize, we took quite a bit of time. We had a lot of content to get through. Nicole, do we have any questions come through?
Yeah, I had a couple here. So one of them is someone was asking, where should they start to make sure that their cybersecurity that they do have in place is effective? So what are some things we would recommend to kind of test the effectiveness of that? I don't know if Cheryl or Jake, if you guys have any thoughts on that, feel free to.
I think the first place is to see what systems they have. And by doing the SRA, the security risk analysis first, I think that's a good starting point for them, is to look at that to see where they may have some vulnerabilities and be able to start from there.
Yeah, perfect. Anything to add to that, Chad? That's probably where I would have started too.
Yeah, I think that's great. Then I'd take a look at your what is your cybersecurity awareness policy look like? What do you have for training? Is it at the time of hire? Do you have periodic updates or ongoing security awareness training, for example, that occurs throughout the year, especially if new policies are put in place that could impact an organization member? I think those are good places to start. And then also that incident response plan, I think is critical. I think making sure that you have one of those in place should something accidentally get clicked on. What are the safeguards that are in place that can address that?
Okay, great. And I think we at least have time for one more question, but another question was, they said that their IT vendor, they think, handles all this for them. So, those that are on the call that maybe think an IT vendor is doing all of these things, what are some potential maybe gaps, or what are some things they should be thinking of or asking their IT company? Do they actually do all of these things for them?
Well, I guess I would say that they may handle everything when it comes to the technical safeguards, for example, but the awareness within the organization, I feel like is an organization responsibility, not just the IT company. So as we've talked about or alluded to in this, I think with the as above, so below type adage that was in there, for example, the mindset from the top down, really within the organization, that top down structure needs to be a culture of compliance and security. So understanding that employees will often model behavior, they're like, oh, well, if it's okay for them to do it, I may do it. So I do think that there is a part of that that is all security culture within the organization that an IT company can't handle on their own.
For sure. And remembering that, a lot of times they're a third party, they're not boots on the ground. So they're not seeing everything,
Right.
that you're seeing as an organization. So like you said, making sure that culture of cybersecurity, that's not something the IT company can maybe create for your organization.
Mhm.
They might be doing some of those tasks for you that help it along, but they're not going to be able to, you know, give those reminders or, just talk about those things during
Mhm.
company meetings or, that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I know we're
Yeah,
at
we could even, oh yeah, I was just gonna add one quick comment.
yeah.
Another way I think that we could look at that was, with the security rule, if you remember back when we'll call it meaningful use still, even though, we all have our opinions about that program. But the meaningful use program, when it first came out, one of the common themes was, hey, we're your IT vendor. We will do your SRA on your behalf, or even better, the EMR vendors, EHR vendors were saying, hey, look, we've got you covered with your security risk analysis for
Mm,
meaningful use purposes. Well, one critical element was forgot about, and that was complying with the OCR security rule and the obligation for doing. So I think that's an example too of where, yeah, they might say they have you covered, but they still require your organization to complete the SRA.
right. Yep. Definitely would ask questions of an IT vendor instead of just assuming that they're
Mhm.
covering everything to do with
Mhm.
cybersecurity.
Right,
Probably good to see like, okay, what actually they're doing. Like I
right.
know one thing clients bring up is, oh, I think my IT vendor is keeping my EPHI asset inventory list for me. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
that's great if they're doing it. You might want to double check that that's actually the one of the services, they're providing and that it's an actual log that they can produce and that they're tracking all those necessary elements. So I think it's good to ask questions when you're using any third parties to help with any of those cybersecurity tasks.
Absolutely.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that was it. Did you want to add something, Cheryl?
Nope, I was gonna say I agree with that. We get that a lot. Well, I
Yep.
think my IT's doing that, and then when they ask, and they're like, "Oh, they're not." So,
Yep. Exactly. All right. Josie, did you have any closing remarks or are we good? I believe, Josie, I did tell someone that we would send out the presentation in a follow-up email. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll send that out in a follow-up email. So I don't have anything else, but thank you to everyone who joined.